Hi everyone, Dan Gunner from Insane Forensics. Welcome back to Tech Talk Tuesday. Today what we're going to explore is how to improve and measure your threat hunt success using threat intel. So we'll explore 3 questions and look at how you can most efficiently use threat intel during your threat hunt or how you can evaluate your program to get better. So hopping straight into it, the 3 questions we're going to look at is 1, what's the coverage between the hunt techniques and scope and attacker TTPs? And what this is looking at is what is your actual threat hunt TTP coverage? How relevant is your threat hunt to what's known about the threat actor itself? Second question we'll dive deep into is what data were you using versus what data could have been used? This will get into some of your completeness on your data collection. How well are you both collecting and processing and using data out there? And third question we'll look at is what's the coverage between intel sources and chosen hunt techniques? And what this will help you do is identify, hey, what threat intel sources are actually being the most efficient? Which ones are catching the most for me? Which ones am I using the most? All our programs are cost restrained, and so this question can help you prioritize going to the sources that really get you the best results. Obviously, you do have to acknowledge different sources will have different strengths, but this will kind of help you understand, hey, what are those strong threat intel sources inside my threat hunting program? All of this talk is based off of SANS paper I wrote back in 2018. We're now moving it over to video form and talking through it. So if you want to dive deeper into the paper itself, it's available for free on the SANS website down there. But the questions above, what we're looking at is both challenging and improving our threat hunt program. So let's hop right into it. So something important that we're going to use today is a modeling approach. Like we want to try to turn this into something we can calculate with a number. So both quantitative and qualitative analysis. Some today we're going to look a little more at the quantitative side. So starting out, one of the things that we can do is model out an attacker's capabilities using what we get from intel, right? So good threat intel is going to help you build this map, but you can take an attacker. In this case, we have an attacker called Neurotic Squirrel, and you can go down to the attack stage. So if you're using the Lockheed Martin kill chain, if you're using the ICS attack kill chain, whatever model you're using to model the phases of attack, that's what the attack stage is. From that attack stage, right, you can break out the different TTPs of that stage. So in this case, we're looking at installation, stage 1 of ICS attack. So in that model, you might then say, okay, well, PS exec might be used. That's going to be the TTP that the attacker will use on that. As you go down, you can say, okay, well, if you have PS exec as a TTP, here are the observables that PS exec generates, right? Here are the footprints in the network or in host logs that I can see of PS exec being used. Once you have those observables, you can even go one step down to the bottom step of it, which is then where would I see those footprints, right? So if you're looking for, like here, access to the admin $ share, you could go to Zeek logs. When we wrote the paper, it was still called Bro, now it's called Zeek. So you'll have to kind of fill in the Zeek there, but you could say, okay, if I'm looking for admin $ share access, I might see that in the Zeek SMB logs. I might see SMB connections in NetFlow. What you can do as you're building out diagrams of the attacker TTPs is begin to build out these tree charts. So you ultimately build that, that catalog of what the observables are for the different TTPs in the given attack stages for the attacker. Something important to note is as you do this for one attacker, and PS exec's a good example, as you do this for one attacker, some of the branches of this tree are going to be common against different attackers, right? So at first, it's kind of an expensive and tedious thing to do, but especially with open tools, as you're documenting more open tools, and as you see more actors using open tools, you can get really richer trees and more complete trees that help you model down. But we'll use this model a little later when we talk about coverage. So we started out with the attacker model. You can do the same thing on the defensive side with your modeling out how your threat hunt engagements actually go. So some vendors call this playbooks. When I was at Dragos, Dragos uses the playbook methodology. But this could just be hunting TTPs if you don't use playbook terminology or if you use other words. And so in this, you have your threat hunt engagement, right? And under that neurotic squirrel threat hunt engagement, you might say, well, we're going to have a playbook for how to look at PS exec. We're going to have a playbook focused maybe just for NetFlow analysis. So these playbooks could be focused on a tool. They could also be focused on, hey, if I have NetFlow on or they could be capability focused. So NetFlow would be like, right, I have NetFlow, what can I do in it across actors? In those given playbooks, then you have observables that the playbooks focus on, right? So in that PS exec playbook, right, we have 4 different observables under that playbook that we're looking for, right? That admin $ share, the run DLL32.exe artifacts. And again, from those observables, then you have the observable sources that you're using during that threat hunt or during that playbook to actually do the analysis. So again, this is to say that just as we modeled the attacker side, you can also model the threat hunting side. And this is where it becomes really important when we, again, talk about coverage. So hopping into the 3 questions I talked about, the first question we have is, what's the coverage between hunt techniques and scope and known attacker techniques? And if you look at the Venn diagram here, right, you have what are the known attacker TTP observes, right? And this is something you can pull from threat intel sources, right? Hey, Neurotic Squirrel uses PS exec. APT29 uses tactic X. APT37 uses tactic Y. That known attacker TTP observables is what you can generate from threat intel sources or from seeing it used against your network. On the right side, this is where you bring in, okay, well, what are the TTPs that were actually reviewed during my threat hunt, right? And in the middle, as you see that green arrow there, your highest known threat detection probability is going to happen in the middle, right? So there's a chance that you'll catch known attacker TTPs or even unknown attacker TTPs. But during a hunt, if it's not in that middle part, then you're only going to check it or catch it by chance, right? So what we want to try to do and what we want to do with this question is say, how do we reduce our findings from just being by chance findings, right? And in this case, if you have the most overlap, it's going to measure the completeness and say, okay, well, if it's in the middle, it's not just going to be a by chance finding. And again, last note, it is possible to detect unknowns, but it's going to be more difficult than if you have it in the center of there. So what we're looking at here, and we talked about the models a lot at the beginning, what we're really doing with those 2 models, with the attacker TTP model and with the threat hunt TTP model, is we're trying to get overlap between those observables on both sides. Because again, if you have overlap, it means, yes, the attacker's doing it, and yes, during a threat hunt, I'm actually looking for those things, right? And so if you think of it just straight ahead, then you're saying, okay, I have all of these threat intel derived observables, and now I know that, I'm looking for 90%, right, of the observables that I know about in the bottom. So this is one way to measure those attacker TTPs against your threat hunt model. So question number 2, what data was used in a hunt versus what could be used? And this is where the modeling, again, becomes very important. And if the boxes in orange are the data that we collected, right, you can look down there and say, okay, well, access to the admin $share. So on that observable tree, there's those 3 branches at the bottom. The far left branch is access to admin $. In this case, if this was the representation of our hunt, okay, well, we collected data from 2 of the 3 potential observable sources that we at least modeled out, right? So, you have a 2/3 or whatever, the exact number is going to be a little more complicated to get, but you have roughly, all pulled out. You have a 2/3 chance of saying, okay, I've collected 2/3 of the opportunities of potentially seeing that. If you go to that middle branch, though, this is where we can begin to see, okay, well, maybe we need to look at the thoroughness of this threat hunt because the, backdoor transferred via SMB, we're not seeing that at all. We didn't pull any of those observables. So seeing that middle branch, a middle observable branch is going to be all up to luck. Again, this is where when you do feedback on the threat hunt, you can say, well, yeah, we really should add some of the observables there so we can see that backdoor moving over SMB. And on the right, this is the prime case, right? So, we're looking for that new run DLL32 process when PS exec kicks off. And we got both an event log and we got a netstat output in this case that might have it in there. So in that case, we have 100% of the observables that we might be used to see this. Our likelihood here is a lot higher than if we don't have the data, right? So this question focuses on the quality of your collection and really what your collection opportunity usage is, right? So, it's not just did I collect this, but it's did I process this? Did I actually use this in the hunt? And this question will really hopefully focus you down and make you think if you're doing this modeling, like, okay, well, how well am I doing data, right? Or how well am I doing my analysis, right? So in this case too, this is where you can get qualitative statements out of it. So, 4 out of 7 or 50% of our observable sources related to neurotic squirrels PS exec are not available for hunting, right? Or they are. Or, you can do the math here and kind of figure out, okay, well, I can put a number behind this, rough number behind this, and that can help you then set a goal to improve, right? You can say, okay, we're at 57 now, let's try to get to 60 or 75, and you can set a real baseline threshold for your hunting program. And like we said, again, the absence of things for that SMB backdoor being transferred, that's where you could say, okay, well, we just need to improve entirely there. So observable coverage here, it might indicate poor usage of the data source or entire gaps in data collection entirely. So moving on to the third and last question, what's the coverage between intel sources and chosen hunt techniques? So again, this is where you can evaluate how well are we using threat intel as an organization and what intel is ultimately helpful. So in this graph or in this chart, you see we have 2 green boxes on the observable column. Let's think that that's threat intel source A. And then in the middle, you have the kind of yellowish orange box. In this case, just looking at it, right, we can say, okay, well, the green boxes, the green intel sources got us to 2 entire branches that the yellow source might not, right? You can also use this to say, okay, well, if we're successfully finding things during a threat hunt, then maybe that yellow box you're actually more successfully finding things with, and you can then say, okay, well, while green is covering more branches, I'm actually detecting threats better in the yellow branch. So maybe the yellow branch is a better threat intel source for threat hunting. This can help you understand. This question can help you understand both how am I actually using intel? Am I actually getting actionable with my intel at the end of the day? And what is the kind of high value and successful impact on this? Thanks for joining in today. This was a quick kind of 3-question overview of a way you could model your threat hunting program against intel and really get the max amount out of it. So these are just 3 of many questions you can ask, but we wanted to go through. And again, if you want to go deeper, definitely check out the paper. And if you want to talk through anything, feel free to reach out. We hope to see you next week. Thanks for coming.